There we go. I had to mute you because for some reason it didn't mute you during. And now I can't unmute you. This is going to be fun. We can't. Can we hear Liam? Liam, speak.
Right. Okay.
Can you hear me?
So are we already? Are we live?
We are live on the BBC.
I'm only getting half of what you're saying.
How are you only getting half of what I say? Right. Can
Hello?
everybody on...
Are you here? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes, no? No, yes.
You're very pixelated. Oh, now he's gone blank. I don't know what you mean. What does... You're never going to be... Oh. I don't want to be on the BBC. I think that's a terrible idea to put us on the BBC. It would really fuck up everybody's life.
On the BBC, did you say?
Yeah.
When
said
you
we are
on the,
live
oh, you were on the BBC,
on the
a while
BBC.
ago, weren't you? I forget about
I was
that.
on the BBC.
You
I've been on the BBC twice this year.
What was the other time you was on the BBC?
I'm trying to think. I'm sure there was something else.
Was that a news night thing?
It wasn't a news night thing. It was a recording for something else.
Oh, okay.
But
right.
yes, I have been on the BBC this year, Katie Veronica.
Twice.
Not doing doing culty things. They weren't quite witchcraft.
Borderline. It's more witchcraft than a lot of self-professed witches do, to be fair.
Yeah, exactly. Right, sorry.
Right, so it's a Q&A. So we got any questions? Because I got a list of questions that have been asked specifically for this show.
Yeah, sorry. Hello, people. Helen says on the BBC specifically for Strictly. She wants us to do Strictly.
Strictly? That's not happening. That is so not happening. I'm never doing that. Fuck that.
So yeah,
my career could hit rock bottom and I still wouldn't go on that shit show. And I've been on paranormal TV, so I know what a shit show is.
Oh.
Right, first question, Mr. Chris. First question. Yeah? Ready?
Go.
What the fuck is other kin? What is this other kin stuff? Can you just give us a basic definition of it so I can cross it off my fucker of a list today?
You give a basic definition. Mine won't be suitable.
I thought it was people that like to pretend they're dragons and shit. Isn't that what it is?
No, other kin is more of that earth angel kind of bollocks, isn't it?
I always get all of these people confused. So would I be right in saying
it's the same thing, but it's a little bit more than I call myself a dragon. It's they identify as one.
So do they have more self-esteem issues? Is that what you're saying? If you've got low self-esteem issues, then you might just have body dysmorphic disorder or some shit like that. If you've got really low self-esteem issues, you might actually think you're a dragon. If you've got really, really fucking low self-esteem issues, then you think you're other kin. So how does that work? Is other kin is there anything worse than other kin? Can you be any more depressed and miserable with your own existence than other kin?
Okay. I think we've been really rude there because that's not exactly what I meant. What I kind of was saying is this kind of earth angel stuff. So where they think they've been reincarnated in some kind of connection with some other kind of spirit. So yeah, your dragons and your gnomes and shit.
A vampire queen from the
Vampire Queens.
ISOP gallery. Galaxy, not gallery, stuff. Galaxy. I always get those two confused. It's like porthole and porthole.
Yeah. So, but what do you really want me to say about it other than...
I would basically like a rough definition of what otherkin is, because it confuses the fuck out of me, all of these people running around in onesies pretending to be something that they clearly fucking ain't.
Well, those are called furries, Liam. They're not...
Right.
They're not otherkin.
Furries, earth angels, otherkin, and people pretending to be dragons are all different. Because I just been lumping them in the same category.
Yeah, that's not... Furries aren't otherkin. Furries are somewhat a sexual preference.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
That is an undergroundy movement.
I think we'll need to research this further, and we'll do a podcast just dedicated to otherkin, because it was a request by a number of people.
Yeah, I think
it was on the list.
I think Michelle asked a question. We're definitely doing a podcast about it, which won't be about furries, Liam. Will be about...
I'm going to have to do some more research then.
You're definitely going to do some research that isn't about furries.
I will get on that Pornhub and I will write otherkin and I will report back on what comes up. I'm not expecting anything to come up, but I might get some search results back.
Wow. That's exactly why Kate Veronica is correct, and you will never be on the BBC.
I have had several opportunities to go on the BBC on primetime news at 6 o'clock. Actually, I said no.
Okay.
But I did have a friend that did go on primetime.
Okay.
Who I could have gone on with, and I decided not to because I ain't doing that sort of shit. I don't like television.
Oh, we have a new person that I don't know this name. Here we go. What's the best way to get started in witchcraft, Liam?
I think it's to buy a Scott Cunningham book, isn't it? That's what everyone seems to do. Go on Amazon, look up the most popular, best-selling books with witchcraft in the title. Buy all of them, read all of them, or at least attempt to read all of them. Realize every single one of them is absolute shit. And then go and get yourself a Patreon subscription to the Thoth Witchcraft Patreon, and then you can begin your real life actual training as a witch. I think that is probably what I've seen many people do, and the only ones that don't make it, okay, are the ones that buy all of those books from Amazon, read them all, but think they're good. Those people, I can tell you, don't make it. Those people just create little YouTube channels and the like, rattling off correspondences about what colour thread you should use for, I don't know, fertility rite or something like that. Because we all know it's light blue, isn't it? All of that sort of shit, you know?
I think I selected the right mug for this show because you're really already getting at me.
Okay. Well, that was okay, so what would you suggest? Were you suggesting that they don't buy a Thoth Witchcraft Patreon membership subscription thingy? It's only £3 a month.
Yeah, I know, but I don't think that that's the best way to get started.
No?
I think you get started by spending lots of time in the Witchcraft Live Facebook group, seeing all the content we've got, and then when you get to the first point that you get stuck, you then buy a Patreon subscription, and we get you past there. I wouldn't expect someone to turn up on the Patreon going, "What's this witchcraft all about?" Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I don't feel that that's what Patreon's for.
Okay, I'm presuming that they're already on some sort of a path of witchcraft. I don't know. But
that wasn't Elizabeth's question, Liam. Elizabeth's question was, how'd you get started?
Well, I can't see Elizabeth's question because I'm on the little ickle screen and I can barely see you.
Yeah, but I also read it out to you, Liam.
How'd you get started in a witchcraft? Well, you get started. Yeah. I'm saying what most people. Am I wrong? But do most people not get started by buying a load of books with witchcraft in the title, reading a lot of them, thinking they're shit, and then going in search of proper witches? Because that's what I find most people do. I'm just saying, cut that shit and just go on the Witchcraft Patreon.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. Obviously, if you want to do a couple of spells in the meantime, then knock yourself out, but don't actually knock yourself out, because we'd consider that to be bad spell, you know.
Yeah. But yeah, to answer probably a little bit more less sarcastic, although Deanna agrees with you totally, apparently. I don't know if that's about slagging off Scott Cunningham or if that's actually the Thoth Witch.
There are a lot more shit authors than just Scott Cunningham. For example, there's a Keldon, there's a Harmony Nice, there's loads of absolute shite witchcraft authors. So don't think that I'm just picking on Scott Cunningham. There's a whole load of them. But if you want to get started in a witchcraft, the most important thing is you attempt to do something. Even if you think that thing isn't going to work, and even if it doesn't work, the most important thing is actually trying to do it. If I decide I want to start learning how to do pottery, I don't just watch YouTube videos about it and read books about it. I actually go and try and make pottery. And it'll end up being really shit your first couple of pottery things. But it's all right because you can brand it. You can brand that as concept art. And as long as you've got a pretty story behind it, some fucker will think you're a genius, right?
Yeah. Well, that's how most of Instagram works, I believe.
As far as I'm understanding, yeah. It looks like it.
But yeah, to add a little bit of that to it for you, Elizabeth, is just to kind of say, yes, we've put obviously a lot of content out there you don't have to pay for. It's on Witchcraft Live, that's on the Thoth TV, and just get a feel for exactly what you're looking at. But like, oh, there you go. Deanna's just said the best answer to that, which is practice, practice, practice. It's all about doing the craft, is Deanna's answer. And I think that's kind of what Liam's trying to get at.
Yeah, craft, just start, you do it.
The best way to start is to just start. So
if you do the same thing over and over again, though, then you are insane. Because if you do something and it fucks up, you don't have to start thinking about, why did that fuck up? Why did I knock myself out doing that spell? Or I have to balance that thing on my head. All of this sort of stuff, you know?
Yeah.
All of the things about improvement. But in order to improve, you have to actually start. Because you can't improve upon something that you haven't actually started on. Right? So start somewhere. It doesn't need to work perfectly, but you do need to actually start doing something. And most importantly, start with something that you either care about or don't give a shit about. I.e., that whole manifesting an orange ball thing we talk about and stuff like that. You don't really care about that, but you could try it. So there is never, ever an excuse for I don't know what to do. Try and manifest something, try and see something, try and spy on something. Anything. It don't matter if it's something that you want or something that you don't want. Just try. Actually do it. That's the most important thing.
Yeah. Start by, I normally say any new spell, start with a little walk, whether or not that's into your garden, along a canal, wherever your local beauty spot is. Go for a wander, see what takes your eye, take that home. If needs be, light a fucking candle if that's what you need. Doesn't matter what fucking colour it is. The importance is that you understand what you're trying to achieve. And if you watch some of our earlier stuff, we talk about manifestation triangles. But you, like I said, a lot of that information's out there. The great thing about going and watching our content to do it is you can always comment underneath and we'll respond. So if something doesn't make sense, there is enough interaction with us, and particularly in Witchcraft Live, because there are a lot of very talented witches in there, and also a lot of beginners in there still figuring stuff out. So
are there any shit witches in there, Chris?
Get involved. Don't try and trigger me.
I haven't found any as of yet. And if they do, this is a very important thing. If there are any shit witches lurking in the Witchcraft Live group, then they are smart enough at least not to comment stupid shit. So it does mean that when you're in the Witchcraft Live group, there will probably be a lot of people that are writing some rather interesting stuff. Whether we entirely agree with all of it, we may not, but it is a grounds for people to build upon their knowledge base, their interaction with other people, and do a little bit of networking.
Yeah. And Helen says, avoid anything Wiccan.
Mm-hmm. That's also quite good advice. If you're not a Wiccan, then for fuck's sake, don't become a Wiccan. And if you are a Wiccan, then try and move up past that, expand that. You need to push that Wiccan mindset of yours and grow it and expand it.
Yeah. Unless you're happy with just devotional work, then by all means you can stay there.
Oh yeah, if you want to be a religious slave, then by all means you can stay in some form of a religion.
So, here you go. Gianna's got another tip. Get a feel for your environment and other tools that you want to use, i.e. candles, essential oils that you want in your spell. And that's her next tip. I like that. Thank you, Gianna. We have a question after a comment from Alex. Alex first said Liam loves his product placement. I don't know.
That is my job, Alex. That is my job. I am supposed to put product placements in here. I might even have to do subliminal messages at some point.
Oh, here you go. Before I get to my question, Lorna says, we must be good if Liam gives us his approval. She says she loves us both.
I'm giving the consensus of the group as a team is that half good. Whether individuals are any good, I'm not saying that they're terrible. But remember, you're only as strong as your weakest link as a team. And I don't see a lot of extremely weak links in the Witchcraft Live group, to be fair. Specifically when you compare it to the Feisty Witches or the Advanced Witchcraft group or pretty much all of the other fucking groups out there on Facebook, as you've probably noticed.
Where most of them like either post memes or are posting about fucking stuff you could find on Wikipedia.
Or arguing about stuff the books say, which is always fucking pisses me off. I mean, why the fuck are you arguing about this or original meaning of this word and that original meaning of that word and copy and pasting some bollocks from a Gemma Gary book?
Yeah. Not everything in Gemma Gary's shit, but
I like Gemma Gary.
She just joins a lot of it up
Gemma
with
Gary,
shit.
Chris, like I like Jesus. It's their followers I don't like. That's the problem. That is where I get the problem with. It is there's a cool dude doing all sorts of magic and shit. Got a little bit of a philosophy about him. Interesting. But then all of these fucking idiots come along saying that this is how you have to do it. This is how it must be done. This is how it's always been done. When I was there and I remember when he made it all up.
Yeah.
Same for She.
Hey, that Jesus was very good at a magic trick. You
were very good at magic trick and quite the drunkard, I heard.
Yeah. But don't you find a lot of the drinkers are good? Mikhail has a question for you. Bearing in mind you are the resident book reviewer. Mikhail says, what is your opinion on the Robin Attersons and the Kerry Wisner books? Horns of the Moon? I've not heard of them. So
I've never heard of them. It sounds like it's yet another book I'm never going to really read. So, Mikhail, I would say I can't comment on them because I've never read them, nor do I intend to read them.
Yeah. Although, if the series is called Horns of the Moon, I'm assuming there is either a heavy lean to Wiccan or there is a lean to this post-Calden traditional witchcraft group that we slowly keep adding members to. But that would just be my opinion. Deanna says, I love anyone that turns water into wine. I must say I do have to agree, but I do like a good vintage. Right, there was an actual question in there. Alex says, what are some techniques to get better at emotional transmutation? So, Robot, tell me about emotions.
Emotion is this thing where you get gooey or angry feelings. You get feelings that overwhelm you, right? Yeah. And there's this thing called anger management class. And in anger management class, they tell you how to transmute emotion, because one's not allowed to switch them off, one's not allowed to bury them underneath a potted plant or underneath anything. You're not allowed to bury them at all. They say that you're supposed to deal with them in a healthy way, which from my understanding means you need to form a circle. This isn't a magic circle, it's just a circle, and you need to share your feelings. And apparently that somehow makes it all better. I'm not entirely sure, Chris.
Okay. I just thought it would be funny to ask you to talk about emotions.
I find that when I have the odd emotion, it's fleeting.
You feel a bit sick?
But also, I tend to use that up. I think, oh, that's an interesting thing. I'm going to use that as an ingredient in a spell or something like that. You know, anger is a really good energy to put into pretty much any fucking spell that you want a quick reaction from. Sympathy often moves me to actually do a spell in the first place. You know, that person I've struck down with some terrible disease, I may sometimes feel moved to undo that terrible thing I've done. Sympathy, not so much the energy there that drives the spell, more the thing that makes me intervene, you know, is interesting. Different emotions, they make me do different things and they add a different thing. Some are for very inspiring, some are very energy driving. Emotion is emotion. There's a word for each of them. And that's how I see it.
Eric says, when I get that feeling, I need sexual healing.
Right, okay.
My answer to the question, which might be a bit more useful because I'm not an emotional robot, is be mindful when using emotional transmutation, because you need to be able to continue in producing that energy. So when you use energy in order to power something, that can be very tricky, because you need to be able to stay angry at that thing. Kind of instantaneous accidental magic is very easy to do with energy. When you get angry and you transmute that without thinking into the power that is needed to, you know, strike someone blind or cause a thunderstorm, those sorts of things. Those are very easy to do in the heat of a moment. To maintain an emotion for an energy source can be tricky, because the second you finish feeling that way about it, how are you supposed to continue to power that spell? You're hoping that you've got enough energy in that first moment to power the whole spell, which is where it's tricky. In terms of general transmutation, that's a lot easier to talk about. Is more of a case of transmuting something continuously, is knowing that how long is that feeling going to last, and then having some kind of energy engine is the word I was after, some kind of engine to convert that energy into the output that you want. So I find the best example of emotional transmutation is at a party. So you've got lots of people around drinking, etc., having a good time, to then kind of feel that, absorb that in.
Depressed.
No. You take enough away that there is still enough to keep going, because you're taking the energy that they are producing based on the drink.
From people that don't realise it.
Leah, you won't probably see this, but there is a huge Liam with lots of M's.
Is it from a specific person?
Yes, it's from Wolfman.
Oh, hello, Wolfman. Long time no speak. I hope Wolfman and the whole wolf pack is doing well.
Good. Luckily, I actually know who that is, but I've actually never met them.
No, you haven't actually, have you?
No, because the one time we tried to make that happen, I had technical difficulties.
Mm.
So, sorry, where were we at? Right,
You were talking
Mikhail
about
said,
turning a frown upside down.
I think I covered that. Mikhail
Okay.
says that the books, the Horns of Moon one, is by Troy Books. Troy Books, is that Gemma Gary's thing?
Gemma Gary owns Troy Books, don't she?
Yeah.
It's
So
probably one of the better publishing companies, definitely, but
yeah.
I can't say I read a lot of books, so I don't know. I'll tell you who would be good to answer that question, though, our friend Lady Poison. She'd probably
She's
know.
very well read.
Yeah. Maybe you can post in the Witchcraft Live group and put at Lady Poison's page on it and say, what do you think of this? And she might answer.
I like that.
Potentially.
Yeah.
I'm not promising that, mind.
Michelle does have a question, but Adele's just asked to follow up from the emotional stuff. Why do you need to continue feeling the emotion? Can you pull the emotion from yourself and then store the energy in something? So yeah, that is one way of dealing with it. But it comes down to how much energy has that individual moment got. So, for example, if how much energy in wattage is laughter, how much wattage is depression, how much wattage is a really, really angry moment where you just want to kill everything. Like, you need to know how much energy those things are and how long that will last as an energy source. So if you're casting it in a moment and that's all you need is that short burst, then that's fine, because that's all you'll need is enough energy to strike that person blind. In that moment is all you actually require. But if you're actually asking to do energy transmutation on a longer term spell, so this is where we talk about single use versus ongoing spells. In a single use spell, energy of emotions can be quite a useful opportunity to make something happen. What's tricky is knowing if you're going to overpower that spell, because some people feel emotions on a bigger scale than, say, robots like Liam. So, it might be that you can actually hold on to that energy of rage longer than somebody else can. And if you're using that energy to power a spell that's a single use, then that's fine. If you are too emotionally invested in something and you're throwing anger, for example, or resentment, then you need to know when that power is going to run out. Or is that going to overcharge it to the point that you're going to kill somebody and you only meant to maim them? Like, that's the difference. So do you want to just strike them blind, or did you actually want her to drop down dead? In that moment, if you use something like anger, you've got more chance of getting the overpower and striking them dead when actually only meant to strike them blind. So that's all we're talking about, is actually knowing knowing your energy levels.
It's
and
no
how
different
to give
than
enough
strength.
energy.
You can always do that. I mean, the more you're used to picking things up, and learning how strong you are, the more you can identify as to whether that cushion on that sofa, is it easy to pick up or is it not easy to pick up? That brick, is that easy to pick up? Is it not easy to pick up? I've never picked up that TV cabinet before with the television on. Maybe I can do it, maybe I can't do it. I think I probably can, because I've picked up the cabinet before and that was easy, and I picked up the TV before and that was fairly easy. So I think I can do it. All of these things come with experience. And emotion, the only thing about emotion and transmutation, I would say, is I'd be interested to know if you're thinking and asking about energy transmutation because it's an easy energy to use as a battery, or whether you're trying to think of it as a coping mechanism, because some people think, I'm a very emotional person, I'm going to start using it up, because that can be, to a certain extent, a good coping mechanism. But at the same time, unskilled wise, it can be a very bad one, hence why people go blind when certain people get upset.
Yeah.
like
so
Chris
the trick,
said.
to add on to what Liam said, because he gave a really good example of that kind of strength one, is sometimes you walk up to an object and you think, oh shit, that was a lot heavier than I thought it was going to be. And then other times you pick it up and you almost fling it across the room because you was expecting it to be heavy and it turns out to not actually be full. You know, when you've had those moments where you pick up a mug and you're not really looking at it, and you spill some because you've overlifted, because you've not actually thought about how much liquid is in the vessel. And in that moment, oh, fuck, I've spilt it all over myself, because you gave more energy exertion than was needed in that moment. And that's what we're kind of talking about, is that you need to know how much you need to have a rough idea of how much energy something required. So I've popped up Diana's answer. Deanna's answer says you can always put energy in a crystal that can't, when you've got too much, and use that afterwards. So store the excess energy in something. It doesn't need to be a crystal. It can be anything that will hold energy.
A penny.
A penny, threads. You know, I love to put excess energy into spinning.
Very often, if you give money away, people will very rarely say no thank you, particularly if it's homeless people.
Yeah.
So you can give your anger away.
So equally, if you're in a situation where you want to help family members or people that you have genuine contact with, it's quite easy to gift them a scarf that you've woven all sorts of things into. Or, you know, if you're going, oh yeah, I can help you fix that, no problem, and then you sew in a few extra stitches. So anyway, we're jumping about again. Yes, so Adele said she's mainly thinking about using it as a battery to power spells. So again, the tricky part with that is if you are using an excess energy, say there's a particular thing that you love doing at home and you use that in order to power a spell. The tricky part is when you stop enjoying it, because it's either pulling too much energy away, or you actually just stop enjoying doing it. So if you've tied a spell to a particular emotion, there is the possibility that it stops happening. Why are you?
I'm thinking about gigolos.
Okay, moving on.
Well, it's irrelevant.
Moving on.
Is there
Anyway,
any other questions? Because we had several questions. So well, Michelle's let me know when I've got to read out the questions that I got.
Michelle's already flagged one that is on your list.
Okay.
So because I think she asked it, she said, "Hi guys, I'm interested in different energy bodies. We have how to access, how to use them, astral to soul." So, which I think was
secret, in that some sort of high-level secret that all of the Thelemites have to spend decades working out, and you just want us to give that to you. Oh, Michelle.
So it's one thing we'll probably cover anyway.
Should we trade, Chris? We'll trade. How's about if she can name one, we'll name one.
Okay.
And then when she stops being able to name one, we'll stop naming more.
Okay.
How's that, Michelle? Would you like to play a game? She'll probably try and get help from the various other people in the comments, but I suppose we could potentially allow that.
She said she's jumped too big a word. Her first word is the soul.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah, that's what we're talking about, Michelle. The soul. Well done. Give yourself a gold star.
Michelle says she's up for the game.
Okay, I'll start then.
Okay.
Physical body. Because it's a body, isn't it? Yes, they said talking about bodies, energetic bodies, and that physical body. You're up, Michelle. Ball's in your court.
So what would you consider? It doesn't just need to be Michelle. Anybody else can play the game too. What would be the next energetic body that you would consider after the after the physical body? What would you say?
Has it got to be in order, Chris? Has it got to be in order of which onion layer? Fuck, I thought we were just going for any old one.
Okay.
This is way more harder than I was led to believe this game would be.
We've got two here. Helen says the astral body.
Oh, that's a very good one.
And Michelle says the etheric body.
The etheric body. Someone's been researching too much ceremonial magic. Etheric body. Michelle, please tell us what the etheric body is.
Michelle says, no, let's jump around for fun. Oh, and Alex says, is there not something below the physical body?
Something below the physical body?
Lower.
I don't know if I would call lower.
I'd say operates the same space.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it would depend very much on what your concept would be of what you're classing as the physical body. Because as I'm sure many people are now, there are many organisms that are part of your physical body. So when you say part of your physical body, what about all of the things that's inside your physical body? Are we counting as that? Because some people would count that as lower. So some people would say general physical body and then look under a microscope and say, oh, well, there's viruses and all that sort of thing. There's part of it bacterial, that's part of the body that's essential for it, but is it technically the body? And then you also go up. So you'd think about the psychology of the situation, your consciousness, your conscious mind and your unconscious mind. What is that? We would probably list that as a layer between, because I didn't know this was coming up. That's why I didn't draw a map earlier. Between the physical world and the astral body, we kind of got the conscious, unconscious, conscious, unconscious, conscious closer to the physical, unconscious closer. Then we got the dream state is in the unconscious, in it. Yeah, it is. Astral's completely different. Astral's way above that. Etheric, unfortunately, on my map only gets the bottom two, so we would have to draw a little bit of etheric on there, which I could potentially do. I'd have to go somewhere else for that.
While you're doing that, obviously, two very good individuals have pointed out two at the same time, exactly the same. So Eric calls it the mental body, and
would you like to see our soul map? There's the one I like. Can you fill them in? Look, I've already filled them in, but can you fill them in?
Alex says, so many bodies, so little time.
That's very true, Alex. So many bodies, so little time.
So Liam's did just give one example of discussing the sets of bodies that are available. So obviously, one way of mapping them would be using the tree of life. But no,
or any old tree. Trees are very good for mapping.
Any tree. Trees are good. And Michelle says, "Oh no, I have to study Kabbalah." No, you don't have to study Kabbalah at all. It's just that Liam likes to map onto the tree of life because it's a very effective way of mapping.
In Western magic is a very, very common way of mapping. There are other ways of mapping it, but it's probably the most common one that you'll come across. Are we continuing with the game, or are we moving on to the next one? I'm not sure if she's given us any more.
Lauren's just given us an entire list.
Oh fuck!
Lauren says she goes bacteria, physical, conscious, unconscious, lunar, solar, mercurial, Venetian, and so on. Party with myself.
Just naming planets now. Does that count, Chris? Does that count?
She says, and
technically that leads into it does, I suppose.
She says it leads into her question. So do you know which one on the list was her question?
Well, she did ask a question, I believe, on the group. She said, can someone invoke/evoke themselves, higher self? And then I've also got in brackets past lives, future lives. Is that part of her question? I don't know, because that was one she did ask at some point.
It's on the same branch, isn't it? I guess towards the question. Michelle said she says, "Okay, I'll work on it on my own, and we'll discuss it during mentorship."
Oh, okay. She doesn't want to share her answers with the rest of the class.
Chickened out,
That's what it is. She don't want to give you all the answers. That's what it is. She knows there's a couple of people that are cheating, that are copying the answers. They're like,
yeah,
writing it all down like they do. Gotta love the people that write notes, endless amounts of notes.
I must say, it's normally one of the first things we ask a lot of mentees to do, isn't it? Map
the human soul,
energetic
and then move
bodies.
on to other forms.
Yeah.
Let's just say that they get a real appreciation for the level of things that we expect them to be able to explain in basic small talk.
Veronica's friends arrived.
Oh no! Don't start that again. Don't start using your cat to cast. Right. So what about this question that that our lovely Lauren asked about? Can someone invoke/evoke themselves? So different aspects of yourselves. What's your opinion of that, Mr. Chris?
I don't know.
I ask you because we know you've got an altar to yourself.
So, yes, is the short answer.
Because
did you want me to specify? So, yes, you can access other parts. That's what we do all the time. So the difference is, how can you do it consciously, knowing which sections you're actually working with. And Katie Veronica says she's not watching that cat.
I don't blame her.
So what was the question? Invoking oneself.
Can someone invoke/evoke themselves or parts of themselves, such as the higher self, a past life, a future life, that sort of thing? And then I made a joke about you having a altar to yourself, which wasn't really a joke because it's an actual thing. I mean, I don't even think Donald Trump, narcissistic as he is, has an altar to himself, as far as I'm aware. But Mr. Chris does. And Mr. Chris does not because he's in love with himself, literally because he's so large, he really does have he really does struggle to keep track of exactly what part of him is in what room. That universe. Am I wrong?
Just said that.
Am I wrong?
As if you just said that.
Am I wrong?
I don't like the word large.
You don't like the way I phrased it, but technically, magically, it is correct, which is why I'll get away with it.
I am magically vast enough.
It's got a layout diagram. You know, like when you go in the mall, and it says where all of the shops are on a map and what floor they're on. Chris has got one of them. It's a little cabinet with a lot of drawers and things. But enough said about that. So I'm presuming, Chris, that you would say it's correct. Have you ever invoked/evoked any aspects of you, consciously or accidentally?
Accidentally all the time. On purpose, less often. So
what about other parts of you? Have they ever invoked/evoked you?
Oh, that's a question. I'm less conscious about it, but that's tricky. That's tricky to be conscious about. So being pulled back from another space is harder for you to actually remember when you're back in at this point. So this is where we talk about dimensions. So, you know, from a 3-dimensional point of view or a 4th-dimensional point of view, it's tricky to hold on what you're doing on a 6th or 7th dimensional experience, which is what you're talking about there, Liam. Whether or not I've just lost everybody by talking about the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Infinite again, but which we still need to do a follow-up podcast on that to go to the next bit. It's tricky to hold on because it's about consciousness and how much room you've got in your conscious mind and unconscious mind to hold on to that information. So the bigger reason for having a alter to oneself in order to do that is about trying to pinpoint specific groups of that energy and allowing you to work directly with it. So whether or not Lauren should have an altar to herself might be a tricky conversation for her to have with herself. For me, it's about, I understand the process well enough to say, you know, here's a map that is the mall or local shopping centre, and I know which shops I need to go in for different things, and whether or not, and I know there are some shops there that I avoid altogether. I put all sorts of electrical tape on the front door to block it off, so I can't accidentally wander into some of those. But it comes down to what we talk about when we talk about the tree. So there are parts of the tree that you don't want to really have access to, because that's messy. So it's whether or not you feel comfortable enough with having access to them all the time. But yes, you can invoke parts of your own. Really depends on where they are. So the tricky part for you will be knowing where you're evoking them from. So, you know, when we did Witch Wars, was it 3 that was about? Was 3 about demons?
I think it was 3.
So with 3, with the invocation one, and the evocation one,
yeah,
you're talking about
knowing demon.
Yeah. It's knowing where to pinpoint, and it's about that environment part again. So can you create the right environment for that version of you to evoke here? So probably an invocation would be easier, or one of those evoke invokes that we were talking about, where mind is here but body is not necessarily there, and that allows you to have a conversation with yourself. The trickier part is making sure at the end of the spell that they go back to where they're supposed to be, and you're not keeping them here, because that can cause a very different kind of complication. But yes, huge subject, hard to fit in the fact that we've only answered question 3 out of 10, and we're almost at 50 minutes. So
I would say then, to cut it very simply, can someone invoke/evoke themselves, whether it be higher self, past or future lives? The answer to that question is yes, and vice versa. So a future life could potentially evoke or invoke you. So a future version of yourself in another life could invoke/evoke you. More than likely, in my experience, that tends to happen is what part of you will they be pulling, or what version of you will they be pulling? They'll probably be pulling the remnant, so the end of life. So after you die, before you fully dissolve, they'll be probably taking that part. So yeah, I haven't got to worry about waking up in the future and talking to a future version of you. I've done both. I've done invocation and evocation of past and future lives, and I have been evoked once by a future version of myself who wanted clarification on something. So it's possible. I would just say yes, can be done. Are you likely to do it? Probably not. And if you do, it'll probably be after you die. More than likely. I've crossed it off my list though, Chris.
Okay. So a few more comments that are thrown about around there. Katie Veronica says people have photos of themselves, so that's a form of alter/narcissism. She also answers Alex at one point saying, when Tiger is used against you, you'll be less fond of her popping up. Somebody's still under the impression that I use Tiger. If I use Tiger, Tiger would have killed you. You would be dead. We may have used her as a threat. Reality of using Tiger was a little bit more questionable. I've missed who that is. Eric says, I sometimes get the feeling my higher self is invoking me to this plane, as what I mentioned a few times, as a suit. So, but there is a follow-up question. I'm trying to figure out who that's from, because it's not showing properly. Oh, it's from Alex. Alex says, question related to Lauren's question. Do people's souls have secret names the same way demons or angels might? If so, could you use? You could discover what that name was. Could you not summon yourself? Okay, that is a very ceremonial magician's way of thinking of that. It's very Abrahamic. The power of word, power of name. It really depends on how much kudos you give to that. It works well within that system because it's designed that way. So the Abrahamic system is designed for it to have that power. That's why it works on kind of demons and angels.
And it's very constricting. It's a constricting system.
Yeah. So if you're wanting to express an entire version of yourself that may not be subject to Abrahamic law, you're going to struggle with that concept.
You wouldn't do it via speech, nor would you do it via its name. Because remember, you don't need to tell your hand to raise your hand because it's connected to you. If I said to Chris and said, Chris, can you raise your hand? Different thing. I'd need to ask him to do that. There we go. Myself, I do it because I'm attached to it. I'm a part of it. So if you're wanting to pull other parts towards you or yourself towards other parts, remember you are connected to them already. Therefore, you don't need to look at it as an external, I summon this, I summon that. You don't need the address because you're already in the house. One of our questions, one of our pre-questions, which is not too dissimilar from our spirits and the like. I don't know if you want me to ask that, or is there another one that's popped up?
No, carry on.
Someone asks how to go about trapping higher level spirits. So we ain't just talking about a little fae. We ain't just talking about a little people or other such. We're talking about big things. Maybe not deities, but big powerful things. How does one go in about trapping them, like in jars and in bottles and stuff like that? Binding, trapping. Big bad spirits.
Okay.
That was the question. I'll cross it off.
Okay. I personally think that in my own practice, that comes down to crafting the right vessel. And by that, I mean both astrally and physically, which is, I think, the part that people forget at this level, is that you have to be working with both in tandem if you are talking about this kind of magic. So Liam said something quite useful earlier today. Alex said, like the time Chris trapped an archangel. Archangels I don't consider to be big energies personally, but that's about perspective, I think.
But that is the sort of energy that we would be talking about, presumably, with this question. Is that mid-ish level?
Yeah. So crafting, it really depends on. Okay, it really depends on how much power you have at your disposal. Not to be talking about measuring, but essentially this is what we're talking about. Because in this moment, do you have the power to enforce that entrapment? So, because if they use a type of energy that allows them to move between planes of existence all the time, you need to be able to control all the levels of existence that they are capable of being in. Otherwise, you're not really trapping them. So, for example, with the Michael example, that is down to the fact that I'm just trapping one version. I didn't matter about the others. It wasn't about restricting movement in other places that entity was with that particular example. It was about a reminding who's boss in this space. So it was an enforcement of this is my space, both physically and astrally. You are not welcome here unless I invite you. So that was really about a slap at the back of the head, bang. How dare you? temporarily trapping me. It was a timeout. It was a reminder of who's boss here. Like, because I don't operate within Abrahamic restrictions, so temporarily have it holding, that's all I was doing there. Whereas if you're wanting to actually trap the entire entity and all its versions potentially, then obviously you're talking, have you got the energy to do that on multiple levels? Can you bear with me 2 seconds?
Oh, something's going on. Is it disappearing? Interesting. There's also something that I would think about the difference between trapping potentially and binding. Because Chris, are they meaning the same thing always when they say binding versus trapping? Because a trap is a trap. They're confined, they're stuck, potentially tricked into it. Whereas binding is a constriction placed on them. So if you put a child in a child seat, they can't get out, but their arms are free to go like that, right? That is a binding and potentially a trap, but it isn't something that just works in one area, is it? You know, it depends on the trap, the binding that you're doing. So
So it really depends on what the question is in terms of trapping particular spirits. The approach, like I said, will always come down to, when it comes to restriction, is do you have the power to stay there and maintain that trap? Is that the goal? You know, it's supposed to be temporarily. The question is, if it's temporary, what happens after? So once you've released it back out into the wild, does it then have the power to come back at you and make life difficult? So, you know, you are having to think about what that is. If you're pulling something into a space in order to operate with it, that's not the same as binding. So a lot of ceremonial magic is about binding. It's about holding a space and then threatening it until it does the things that you want it to do. I don't personally think that's a particularly good way of working if you're wanting to be productive. But again, it always comes down to, like when we talk about contract magics, it comes down to, do you have the ability to enforce it? So if something is in your space, how much control do you have about it being in your space? Or does it have the control? In which case, it'll leave when it wants to leave, and it'll do what it wants to do, kind of like the cat. I've invited it into the space. She can do what she likes, and she'll leave whenever the hell she likes to also. I have to use
otherwise
big lots.
You would have to put effort into picking her up and throwing her out or scaring her off.
Yeah. So that's what we're talking about when you're talking about binding and trapping magics and trapping energetic bodies.
Yeah, we would have to give a very specific example of a very specific spirit and go through the working of how it would be done, potentially. In order
That's lovely. I don't know whose comment that is. It says, how to make enemies and receive death threats. Ceremonial Magic 101. So,
okay. Right, there's one more question. There's one more question on the original questions that were set in the comments, and that is Norse gods, ? Specifically, old ones.
Old ones?
Old ones. So we ain't talking modern like Odin or Loki. Okay. We're talking old. We're
talking the original ones.
The names that are forgotten.
Okay.
The tribal ones. The ones where I look up at the sky when there's a thunder and lightning, and I look at the sky and work with that specific sky.
Yeah.
And not say, village down the road, they're worshipping this god. Seems to be working for them. let's start worshipping that god. More a case of, which is something that modern magical practitioners could really fucking learn something from. Let's see what I find, and let's concentrate on what I can see and what wants to work with me, versus all of these things in that book, or all of those things that those people are working with. Let's just find their names out and work with them and copy them. And Neoplatonist equate them with the same fucking thing as what I'm working with, which is not necessarily true. Yes, the old approach, Old Norse, is something brilliant for the modern practitioner to study, because it will highlight how good and meaningful it is to actually work with the thing that's in fucking front of you, as opposed to just going by the reputation and name of some random thing you're going to try calling up.
Yeah.
What about these local spirits, Chris? Do you think they should be offended? Do you think they should be offended when some random Wiccan with by the name Raven decides to conjure up some sort of a spirit in the book that's not even as powerful as the one that literally just walked past the window? Do these spirits get offended by such things? Do they think, why the fuck are you conjuring up that when I live down the road from you and I taught that bitch everything it knows?
Yeah. Yes and no. One, I think a lot of local spirits are used to being ignored.
Yeah, very true. I don't blame them, to be fair, actually.
And in some ways, I probably imagine the ones I particularly work with, I would have probably gone, they're quite happy being left alone and not being part of their mundane, boring problems. And I think I would rather, Hecate run around doing what she does. Because at the end of the day, it's mundane, boring shit that people ask for these days. I think if it was down to the good old days when it was survivalist magic, I'm sure the local spirits would be all up for that, because it actually impacts them. So the local land spirits, etc., the local, elemental magics, that sort of thing. If they're cutting down your forest in order to build a new log cabin, then I suppose that's more impactful on your existence. And you've got to find the way of working with it. But I think when you're asking how to ensnare that boy that looked at you once in the supermarket queue, and you've decided that you're going to be married, 4 children in the next 10 years, then yes, you probably are better off calling for someone like Hecate to actually deal with that, than you are going to speak to the local land spirit, because the local land spirit's going to be like, what the fuck do you want to ask me for?
It's not just about land spirits, though, to be fair, because you're talking about things that appear to you that you can see versus things that you think that you should be working with because society tells you that you should be working with it. When you look at Old Norse, you're looking at tribal, you're looking at tribes, and all of these tribes aren't necessarily that friendly with each other, potentially. And you're talking about they are going to be working with, because like Chris said, survivalist magic, things that are necessary for their survival. Now, every now and then, one other tribe might get bigger and bigger and bigger and might start to, try and perhaps expand their territory or something. And they might have some big bad god that might then get transferred across and take over slowly but surely, because that's essentially what Odin did. Just went from one sect chieftain to another and acquired the chieftains and thereby got the tribe.
Okay. So what we're talking about there is the opposite. So sorry, I thought the question was going and finding the local spirits, whereas you actually mean the ones that, as you raise energy levels, are interested in you. Sorry, I missed the point of the question. So yeah, from that point of view, we're encouraging. Well, we like to encourage that the entities that you deal with are the ones that actually approach you, or are aware of you working, rather than someone flipping through a book and going, "Oh, I like the sound of Thor,"
because that's what you're getting with modern Norse. And what you're getting is you're getting history books very often saying, this is this old Norse god, and he was the king of all the gods, kind of like your equivalent of Zeus type thing. And that's super important, and that's the one you've got to work with. Or, and then there's Thor, and then there's Frey, and then there's this, and they're all very, very old. And then, read the stories that were written down by Christians, and this and that. And it's kind of like, well, actually, if you're talking Old Norse, you are talking very specifically survivalist magic, and they're only working with the spirits behind the forces that they see as a good thing or a bad thing. So this is literally about, the terrible storm, it has a force there. If I interact with this force, I can bargain with it, I can explore it, I can learn from it, and then I can control that storm, send it to my enemies, make it go away, whatever. That's something that magic, I don't think, is learned that way, because we see a lot of religion as worship, and in academia that's also taught. It's taught, the priests, the this, that, and the other groups of shamans and this sort of thing, they worship. It's religion is worship. Our modern approach to religion and history, and the history of religion, is worship, is kind of Abrahamic. What they don't think is, they don't necessarily think magical practitioner working with spirit. Some spirit help and teach magical practitioner. Some spirit take advantage of magical practitioner, and it being a bit of a grey area as to what spirit,
Part of the problem is we live in a post Jeff Bezos world, where we're used to just going, I want this, therefore what does the internet tell me I need? And this is what people do, is they go, well, I want to worship, or I want to work magic. So I search on the internet, how do I search magic? And you get all these kind of, pathos feeds and other things that tell you that this is the version you should be looking at. Or, Instagram tells you should be dealing with this. So, I saw a raven last night. That must mean that that's something to do with the Morrigan or Odin. Like, people will make those adjustments. They don't trust their instinct. What they do is they try and find an answer academically, like you say. So they go, well, this must have happened to somebody else. Therefore, someone will have written on the internet about it. And in some ways, that is kind of true. Someone will have written about it. But unfortunately, Google decides how quickly you get to that answer and who other shit you're going to have to read before you get there. Whereas actually, you'd have been quicker by doing something like meditate on it. I know I just said that, but you would have found more answers going into a dream world and looking at what you'd experience from another lens than you would reading about it over and over again. Yeah, to be fair, Michelle's just put that a really good way. Sorry, I got distracted by her version. She says, I'll give you all my energy and devotion, and you'll give me a hug sometimes.
Oh dear. That is very much like, I mean, we've gone through this enough times, but the amount of fucking, you can see why no one is religious or believes in work with spirits. I mean, the amount of practitioners out there that say do work with spirits, and they will settle for occasionally that spirit doing something for them is fucking ridiculous. I know people that evoke spirits on a regular basis, like clockwork, to leave offerings for them and ask, and every now and then they might get that thing. It's like, why the fuck are you working with something like that? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
But I don't want to go off on a rant.
No, because we don't have time. We're already over time. But essentially, what we're talking about here is actually just understanding what that relationship should look like. You've got to remember that we're kind of in that kind of post-Abrahamic part of life now, where you've got to adjust to what it was like before or what the future is going to look like. You know, just because we used to do it away with the Norse pantheon or whichever ancient pantheon you're talking about, there are a lot out there that are a lot more ancient than the Norse. They're not as plentiful and around, but there is plenty of them out there for you to choose from. So it is tricky as to how to decide to deal with that. But the old way is not necessarily the best way. What you should be looking for is a new way, not a old way. There is something that is different about practicing the old ways, but you have got to move forward. Otherwise, you'll end up back where we were before, which is a god will come along, the Abrahamic version, and just decimate everything like it did this time. It's not the first time, it won't be the last, but that's because you always go through this cycle of new way, old way, new way, old way, and don't actually think about what is an alternative way of looking at it. Is there a better way of practicing?
Yeah.
I don't think you get there.
If you're one of those people that want to come to us because you think we know a little bit about magic and have experience in that and might, you know, be educated on the subject, and come to us and ask us about, oh, I want to work with this specific old version of this, or this specific old version of that, or I want the real names, I want the original names. Have a word with yourself, because you are not going to be received very well from us. If you come to us because you think, the academic books that everyone seems to be looking at is a little bit out of date, I want the cutting edge stuff. I want to know about the Egyptian snake goddess that's only just been discovered, you know, instead of all of what they're working with, because all the other pagans are working with Isis and that. I want to know about the snake goddess because she's new, even though she's just an aspect of one of the others. I want to come to you so you can tell me about that, so that I can work with that and feel like I'm doing something that's a special and a little bit more deep and original. Bollocks. Get that out of your head. You care if you're on the path that we are teaching anyway, or helping with. You are on a path of becoming a witch, a powerful witch, magician, whatever, not the bitch of a less well-known spirit, or trying to recreate something that died a long time ago for fucking good reason. Recreate that in a bit more of an authentic way than the other person is a couple of doors down, or the other group is around the corner. We don't care about that, okay? And you shouldn't either. If you want to work old Norse, my suggestion is that you kill yourself and then go and have a life in old Norse. Now, you don't actually need to do that realistically, because technically you would already have a life there had you already done that. So you might as well just live out the rest of your life working with something more local and more exciting. But ultimately, what we're saying is recreationalist, stay away from, because you aren't going to recreate it. If you're taking things, inspiration, not recreation, inspiration, use it to inspire your own practice. If you want to fuck about with famous names of spirits and the like, fuck about with famous names of spirits and the like. If you want to go and explore different cultural ways of doing things, go and explore it. But don't try and get wrapped up in some kind of system that you think is better
because it's
old. Because it fucking ain't, trust me. It just isn't. You may learn things from it, but it is not a perfect system.
We're not going to be able to do any more of the questions on the list, but we can probably answer the last few that are on here. Okay. I think it was Helen said, what's the current problem, in inverted commas, going on with the Norse pantheon Mesopotamian problem? So all I'm going to say about that, because we can't cover it here and it is on the list, all I'm going to say about it is is what we're talking about. It's exactly what we've just been discussing. So the idea that you what?
At least give them something. It's
I
not
was
really,
trying
is it?
to until you
It's
fucking
not that.
interrupted.
Well, I don't
said
know. I
we've
don't want
just
you.
been
I
talking
know
about
we don't
it.
really want to talk about it, but let's not lie. It's not necessarily about idiots trying to recreate things. I think the
Did you let
problem
me finish,
with the
Liam?
North thing, it's a little
Did
bit
you
more.
let me finish?
Oh, shut up! I'm sorry.
Yeah, shut up. For once in your life. So what I was trying to say before I was rudely interrupted by some dickhead robot was that it starts with what we're talking about there. It's about people rediscovering something that's trying to rediscover itself. So the complication you've got there is you've got a cycle that we were talking about of new, old, that has the potential to have a footing again. And what's interrupting and causing that to grow a lot quicker than it should be is people's fascination and obsession with finding the old ways. And if enough powerful individuals find the old ways and manage to help these entities re-exist, there's a reason we left them scattered the way that they were. So they should have stayed scattered. If they ever become wise enough about the fact that there are scattered, we've talked about it before briefly. There are literally hundreds and hundreds of versions of Odin out there. If all of them would stop bickering amongst themselves and actually mass, then we'd have a serious fucking problem. So we keep talking about it because people keep needing to go and find this old method of doing things, the old ways, when actually what they need to be doing is discovering a different way. So no, I wasn't passing off the book, Liam, and gatekeeping about it. I was trying to make a point before you interrupted.
I jumped on there a bit too quick there, did I?
You should fucking know better. That's my point.
I was just surprised how far you would go. I was wondering how far you would go.
So at the end of the day, like I said, it's one of those things we have put a couple of things on the podcast list where we will discuss it a little bit more. But we're kind of hoping you'll get there on your own and realize exactly what we're talking about. So it's one of those things. Sorry. The Mesopotamian problem I'm not going to touch. That is a very different problem.
It's a similar problem. It's a similar problem, but vastly different personalities, let's say. Because if we're summing up the Norse problem, we're summing up with, if you get a bunch of neo-pagans trying to contact old deities and old spirits, they're kind of not really about or paying attention. Fuck all really happens. Let's be fair, not a huge amount happens. When those deities themselves decide to try and come back, a bit of shaky ground. When those deities themselves try to come back and you've got a bunch of neo-pagan idiots fucking about, and these deities that get annoyed with that or decide to curtail these people and go off and do their own thing, i.e. not work with the sycophants and work with other things, then you do potentially have a problem. And whenever this has a problem, whenever this kind of thing arises, which it does, let's be fair, every couple of centuries with something, what you get is what is that thing that they use when those drones kill like loads of civilians? Collateral damage. That's it. Collateral damage. What you get is you get collateral damage, and the collateral damage will very much depend on the pantheon. With the Norse pantheon, you know, Vikings and shit like that are often associated with that sort of thing. So you're talking about warriors and people that rape and pillage, that sort of thing. That is not a particularly bad problem. Lots of bad shit go down, yes, lots of bad shit, but very human shit. go down. When you're talking about other pantheons that are forbidden from coming here for good reason, and you get them trying to come back, then that's another problem entirely. Okay, so Norse problem, a problem, collateral damage. Other such problems, a little bit more serious, particularly when the two problems dislike each other as well, which enough said about that.
Yeah, the Norse problem is too much of a melting pot, mainly because they seem to be popping up all over the US, which is a place that's very good at warring, has done for the whole time it's existed. There is a lot of energy for that group to play with, and if they gain their foothold there again, we have problems. Anyway, Kate Veronica said something that I'm not sure because I missed it at the time. She said, "Why didn't I verbalize that when I spoke to her?"
Why didn't you verbalize that? I found a button and it brings up comments. Okay. Why didn't you verbalize that like that when you spoke to me, Chris? I've got a new, totally politically incorrect answer about it being survival. I'm not entirely sure what she's on about.
No. So I think we were talking about survivalist magic earlier, but I'm sure she'll ask the question if needs be. Okay. Lasari says, is there another Witch Wars? Yes, we'll be launching it at Ask a Witch in December. So a nice Christmas present for you all.
A Christmas special. We thought bring Christmas cheer with a Witch War, obviously.
Yeah,
obviously. Especially this one. It's going to be ever so cheery.
And then I think it was Alex. Alex has said, does this apply to the Greek pantheon as well? No, it doesn't.
They never fucking left, let's be fair.
Because they never left. So why do you think they're neoclassical, post-classical? It never leaves. They're perfectly, cemented into this world, and it works for them. It's why we always, I will always point in those directions for spiritual help if that's what you're requiring. They're a safe group to work with, relatively speaking. Some of them have got ideas above their stations, but that's magic. So that's there.
Western magic's built on the Greco-Roman, essentially. So, it's just you have a weird little cult that interrupts things for 1,000 years or so. But I mean, they're dying out anyway. So, and there's not and it's not like you can't learn from that, right?
Yeah.
So there's things to be learned from this whole Abrahamic thing. Lots to be learned from that as a magical practitioner. So it's not like it's a bad thing. I mean, there are harsh lessons,
Yeah. At the end of the day, they are kind of splinter cells. They all kind of lead back in the same direction. What's difficult is with the Abrahamics, the kind of solar story was a really hard sell. And the idea of an individual, one only God, is a tricky one to sell when there are so many other gods around. So it's often difficult for it to plant the seed. The great thing about, and both annoying and interesting at the same point, is the kind of Norse problem is about a particular part of that. What appears to be multiple is actually really just another version of the Abrahamic. But
it's reversed. It's like when you had those old VHSs, Chris, where you'd go and then you'd rewind it and all go backwards. We have the tide of originally came in and now it is receding. But it doesn't like this whole dawning of the age of Aquarius shite. It doesn't just, there we go, enlightenment, no one believes in this or follows this anymore. It is literally a case of, oh, look, the old masks are coming back now. The old masks. Oh, it's got the old mask on. But it's the same fucking source of energy.
The same fucking thing. Anyway, we won't talk about that anymore. Greg made a comment. just then about most of the Odinists I've run into are quite aggressive and stubbornly so. They will be. That's Odin's way. The one-eyed fella is a pain in the arse, but if you ignore him for long enough, he does disappear. That was us caught up on those. Are there any burning questions that people need to ask? Throw them in now, because otherwise we have done an hour and a half. We normally only do an hour. Well, I say normally. Let's face it. This is normally about what we do.
Pick a number between 6 and 10, Chris, and I'll get one from the last of my list.
Okay. Well, you like 8, so let's go 8.
8's my favourite number.
Yeah.
Question 8 would have been getting energy streams to match. Talking magical correspondence says. How do I know what day goes with what moon phase and so on and so forth? So batteries, I suppose, for workings and spells. If I'm going to combine energy streams, how do I know which ones won't react and blow up in a bad way?
Well, I prefer the Mad Professor approach. Mix them and find out.
Interesting. I do the
opposite. Just because I think it's fun. However, yes, when working with, I think it's just about time for me. I think people try and look up correspondences because they want to rush and start straight away. Where actually,
I think it's because they don't fucking know what they're talking about, and they just read a book that says get this blue candle and get this fucking herb.
I think if people actually took the time to design spell work the way that they should, in a far more organic way of working, if you were to go back to the old cunning folk, they would have had, their stores of different things that they like to use and keep. But in a pinch, they would just use whatever was there. So, if you've got a fully stocked pantry that you can go and just pull the items you need, then that's great. As long as you know what all of those things in that pantry do. And I don't mean by reading a book about them. I mean about actually exploring each of those individual ingredients. And then you wouldn't have things blow up in your face because you know the ingredients that are there, and it's like when you cook a meal. At the end of the day, if you're any good at cooking, you will know how much spice to add before it's just going to blow everybody's face off. But how did you learn that? You spent time putting it in different amounts, in different things, occasionally reading about them. In a good old herbal or whatever, or you got a set of old cookbooks, and you look in the cookbook and you go, oh, well, that sounds a bit dodgy. I don't know if I'd use all of that. And you just add a pinch at a time, and then you'd stir it around, taste it. It's not quite there. Throw some more in, stir it up again, give it a go. Like you wouldn't just kind of go, the book says I need to put 2 whole bags of hot chilies in. And you kind of go in, wait a minute, that's far too much chili. Why does it say 2 bags? Oh, there's a smudge on the page. If you'd have just followed the recipe because how it was read, you'd have then ended up with, making a massive mess. But both, from the front end and the back end, I imagine, with that much chili. But you would know instinctively that sounds like a lot. And I think what lots of people don't do is apply common sense. Does that make sense to you? You wouldn't do that if you were putting it in your mouth or if you were rubbing it onto your skin. So why do you make that error when you're talking about magics? Like, that's what baffles me. It's kind of because it's an imaginary thing you can't see until you engage your psychic awareness properly. You kind of go, oh, well, I don't quite know how much is enough. So I'm going to go read on the internet how many I should use. And that's where I think problematically it blows up in people's face. Did that make sense?
Yeah, I think the real problem with this kind of recipe thing, like if you get a spell book or you get some YouTubers and that saying about getting this ingredients and that ingredients and put it together, what they're doing is they're giving you the recipe, but they're excluding the method. And this is something that I see a lot. People think, okay, I've been told the ingredients and I've been told how to use it, because they've said get the candle and they've said sprinkle this oil on, pour this oil on the candle, and then pour this powder on the candle and then light the fucker. And that isn't the method. That isn't the method. That is not how it works. When you get a recipe that teaches you how to make a lasagna, you have the ingredients list that says lasagna sheets and all of the other stuff. But you also get the method of you having to make that and when you put it in the oven and how that all fucking works. You don't get that. That bit about putting all this shit on a candle and lighting it is not the fucking method. The method's how the cooking process works, how it works. What the fuck is it? Is it supposed to come out like a cake? I don't fucking know, because I don't know what lasagna is, because I've never seen it before.
Yeah.
You know, so my take on it, which is kind of not too dissimilar from what Chris said, but I would just word it slightly differently because I'm a robot. And that is, if you're trying to mix energy streams, what you do is you do kind of what scientists do. You look at each individual energy stream and understand them individually first and work with them for other types of spell work and things like that first. And then you'll know each one. So because you'll know each one, you can then think and make educated guesses as to which ones you may want to combine together. But rather than making energetic guess, educated guess, you then go and do it and see what happens. And then when you see what happens and it works well, you should understand the reason it's working well. What you don't do, unless you are taking precautions, is throw it all together and see what happens. Partly because I think that most people that are mixing energy streams most of the time for beginners are doing it just because they want to make a big bad spell that they're trying to tackle this way above their magical weight class. So they're saying, oh fuck, I really need this fucking money, so I'm going to put everything on it, and then potentially it could go horribly wrong. But slowly and but surely understanding the each individual ones and then understanding combinations of them together. When you learn piano, you learn each key and each note, and then you put and play notes together, and eventually chords, and eventually two hands. But we don't need to talk about working with other aspects of yourself or spirits and the like. We'll leave that to another day. Was there any other last questions, Chris?
No, that was it. I think either we've put them all to sleep or they're all burnt out with crazy ideas that they're going to go and do. We hope.
All right. Well, I suppose over and out, and that's it.